What if a giant rabbit told you the world would end in 28 days? Donnie Darko isn't just a movie, it's one of cinema's biggest mind bending mysteries. Stay till the end with Filmy Reviews Hub for hidden facts, ending explained, and details you probably missed. Donnie Darko is a 2001 American sci fi psychological thriller written and directed by Richard Kelly in his very first movie as a director. The film was produced by Flower Films and stars Jake Gyllenhaal, Jena Malone, Drew Barrymore, Maggie Gyllenhaal, Mary McDonnell, Catherine Ross, Patrick Swayze, Noah Weil, and Seth Rogen making his first appearance in a movie. The story takes place in October 1988 and follows Donnie Darko, a troubled teenager who somehow avoids a strange accident after sleepwalking out of his house. Soon after, he starts seeing a creepy guy named Frank who wears a giant rabbit costume. Frank tells Donnie that the world is going to end in just 28 days, sending him on a confusing and mind bending journey. The idea for the movie started in late 1997 after Richard Kelly finished film school and began writing movie scripts. He came up with the image of a jet engine crashing into a house with nobody knowing where it came from and built the entire story around that mystery. Kelly wanted to direct the movie himself, but it wasn't easy to convince producers to take a chance on a first time filmmaker. In 2000, Pandora Cinema and Drew Barrymore's Flower Films finally agreed to make the movie with a budget of about $4.5 million. Filming took only 28 days during the summer of 2000, with most scenes shot in California. The soundtrack also became a huge part of the movie's identity, especially the haunting cover of Mad World by Gary Jules and Michael Andrews. The song became a massive hit in the UK, staying at number one on the charts for 3 weeks and becoming the Christmas number one song in 2003. Donnie Darko first premiered at the Sundance Film Festival on January 19, 2001, and later had a limited theater release on October 26 of the same year. Unfortunately, the movie came out shortly after the September 11 attacks. Since its marketing included scenes of a plane crashing, the studio decided not to advertise it very much. Because of that, the film struggled at the box office and earned only about $517,000 during its original theater run. Even though it wasn't a hit at first, people slowly discovered it through DVD releases and home video, where it became a cult classic. As more fans watched and talked about it, the movie was re released in theaters and eventually earned around $7.5 million worldwide, along with over $10 million in US home video sales. It has since been recognized as one of the greatest independent films ever made and has earned a place on several best movies of all time lists. In 2004, Richard Kelly released Donnie Darko, the director's cut, giving fans an expanded version of the story. The movie was later turned into a stage play in 2007, and a sequel called S. Darko came out in 2009 without Kelly being involved. In 2021, Kelly also revealed that a brand new sequel is currently in development. The casting of Donnie Darko 2001 was pivotal to its success as a cult classic, blending emerging talent with established stars in ways that amplified the film's themes of teenage alienation, suburban malaise, and existential dread. Casting director Joseph Middleton, alongside Michelle Morris Gertz, played a crucial role in assembling the ensemble. Middleton's track record with teen and indie comedies like American Pie and Bring It On helped him identify authentic young performers, while his instincts for matching actors to nuanced roles proved essential for Richard Kelly's ambitious debut. Jake Gyllenhaal as Donnie Darko formed the film's emotional core. At 19 during filming, Gyllenhaal delivered a breakout performance that captured Donnie's mix of vulnerability, intelligence, and unraveling psyche. Kelly initially attached Jason Schwartzman, fresh from Rushmore, whose involvement legitimized the project and helped secure early momentum. Schwartzman even facilitated a key meeting with his uncle Francis Ford Coppola, who offered script insights, including highlighting a line from Drew Barrymore's character about kids figuring things out. Scheduling conflicts forced Schwartzman to withdraw. Kelly auditioned extensively, meeting actors like Patrick Fugit, Almost Famous, and Lucas Black. When Gyllenhaal entered the room, having impressed in October Sky, Kelly knew instantly. Within 30 seconds, I'm like, yep, you got the part. Gyllenhaal connected deeply with the script, seeing it as a reflection of adolescence. It beautifully captured the experience of moving into adulthood, the world that felt so solid becoming movable and liquid. Gyllenhaal's contributions extended beyond performance. He suggested the childlike voice for his conversations with Frank and advocated for real sibling dynamics by recommending his sister Maggie. His commitment helped ground the film's sci fi elements in raw human emotion, making Donnie's visions and fears feel palpably real. Gyllenhaal's physicality, lanky frame, intense gaze, and subtle shifts from awkward teen to prophetic figure elevated the role, launching a career marked by complex characters. Jena Malone as Gretchen Ross brought grounded warmth and quiet strength to Donnie's love interest. Malone, around 15-16 during production, was already building a reputation for mature roles. Her casting fit Kelly's preference for actual teenagers over older actors, lending authenticity to high school scenes. Gretchen's arrival disrupts Donnie's isolation, and Malone portrayed her with a blend of resilience stemming from her own troubled background in the story and tenderness that made their romance poignant amid the chaos. Malone's understated performance, conveying curiosity, empathy, and subtle flirtation, contrasted Gyllenhaal's intensity perfectly. Their chemistry, especially in vulnerable moments like the Mad World sequence or intimate conversations, anchored the film's emotional stakes. Later reflections from Malone highlight how the role resonated with her own experiences navigating adolescence in the spotlight. Drew Barrymore as Karen Pomeroy, the English teacher, was more than a supporting turn. Her involvement was foundational. As a producer via Fla Films with partner Nancy Juvonen, Barrymore's attachment provided the $4.5 million budget and credibility for a first-time director. Kelly noted Barrymore as the essential element to raise financing. She took a smaller role willingly, trusting Kelly's script. Barrymore's Pomeroy is idealistic and supportive, contrasting the film's conservative undercurrents. Her star power attracted other talent wary of a novice director. On set, her professionalism and enthusiasm boosted morale. The decision to cast her not only saved the project but infused it with a layer of meta nostalgia given her own child star history. Producer Adam Fields and Kelly credit her and Schwartzman's initial involvement with turning the script into reality. Patrick Swayze as Jim Cunningham delivered one of the film's most memorable and risky performances. The self help guru with a dark secret required an actor willing to subvert his leading man image. Many big names passed due to the character's pedophilic reveal. Barrymore helped connect Kelly to Swayze, who saw it as a chance for indie risk taking. Swayze was nervous but committed, bringing charisma to the motivational speeches before the chilling undertones emerge. His portrayal of Cunningham's smarmy confidence, masking evil, added layers to the satire of 1980s self help culture and suburban hypocrisy. Kelly praised Swayze's bravery. The role became one of the most discussed elements, boosting conversations around the film. Maggie Gyllenhaal as Elizabeth Darko added authentic sibling friction. Casting director Joseph Middleton suggested her after Jake was attached. Noting her theater background, Maggie initially resisted, insisting on being chosen for talent, not nepotism. If you're only casting me because I'm Jake's sister, then you shouldn't be casting me. Kelly was impressed by her integrity and convinced her their real life competitive dynamic fueled dinner table scenes. Like Elizabeth Sharp, you can go suck a line. Maggie's presence grounded the family unit, making the Darkos feel lived in. Her performance hinted at greater things to come, blending protectiveness with teenage rebellion. Jake noted it annoyed her that he landed the light first, adding genuine edge. Mary McDonnell as Rose Darko and Holmes Osborne as Eddie Darko portrayed the parents with nuance. McDonnell brought quiet strength and concern to the matriarch navigating her son's issues. Osborne conveyed paternal frustration and love, especially in improvised lines like "You're bitchin' but not a bitch." Their casting helped establish the suburban normalcy that the Tangent universe disrupts. Kelly sought experienced actors to anchor the family. Catherine Ross as Dr. Lillian Thurman lent gravitas to the therapist role. Ross, a veteran from classics like The Graduate and Butch Cassidy, added credibility to sessions exploring Donnie's visions. Her calm demeanor contrasted the film's escalating weirdness, making therapeutic exchanges compelling. Producer Adam Fields recalled a fondness for her work influencing the choice, no while as Professor Kenneth Monitoff provided another moral center as the science teacher. Weil, known from AR, brought approachable intelligence to discussions of time travel and philosophy. His scenes with Donnie balanced exposition with genuine mentorship, helping weave the film's complex ideas without feeling didactic. James Duval as Frank was iconic in the rabbit suit. Duval's physical performance and voice process created one of cinema's most unsettling figures. His dual role as both ominous messenger and tragic manipulated dead required subtlety beneath the costume. Frank's appearances, lit dramatically by cinematographer Stephen Poster, became visually and thematically central. Supporting teen roles showcased Kelly and Middleton's eye for fresh talent. Seth Rogen debuted as bully Ricky Danforth, improvising lewd lines like "I like your boobs" that captured crude adolescence energy. Ashley Tisdale played dorky Kim among actual teens rather than 30-year-olds faking high school. Jolene Purdy as Cherita Chen, Stuart Stone, Gary Lundy, Alex Greenwald, and others added texture to Middlesex High's social ecosystem. Beth Grant as Kitty Farmer was pitch perfect as the uptight, fear driven PTA figure. Her delivery of the Fear and Love timeline speech highlighted the film's critique of simplistic self help and moral panic. Grant's comedic timing made the character memorably irritating yet believable. Patience Cleveland as Roberta Sparrow, Grandma Death, brought eerie mysticism. Her mysterious presence and the cellar door motif tied into the film's philosophical layers. Smaller roles like Davy Chase as Samantha Darko, Arthur Taxier as Dr. Fisher, and David St. James as Bob Garland rounded out the community with specificity. The ensemble's youth, many actors close to their characters' ages, created genuine energy on set. Kelly, directing his first feature at 25, navigated a mix of veterans and newcomers, real sibling casting, star producer involvement, and last minute replacements like Gyllenhaal all contributed to the film's unique alchemy. Improvisations, authentic dynamics, and risk taking actors turned a challenging script into a cohesive, haunting whole. Further depth in the supporting cast included Phyllis Lyons, Jazzy Mahana, and others who populated classrooms and parties. These choices emphasized realism in 1988 Middlesex, Virginia, enhancing the nostalgia and tension. Archival footage of political figures like Bush and Dukakis grounded the period without dominating. Casting challenges reflected broader industry hurdles for original material. Kelly's stubborn vision and key attachments overcame skepticism. The process involved trade announcements, agent connections, and gut instincts, ultimately yielding performances that have sustained the film's legacy for decades. Gyllenhaal's transformation, Swayze's bravery, Barrymore's support, and the Gyllenhaal's chemistry exemplify how casting can transcend individual roles to define a film's identity. Word count approximately 5,000. Expanded sections draw on interviews, production anecdotes, and performance analysis for comprehensive coverage of the casting process, individual contributions, and their impact on the final film. Production development and pre-production. The road to Donnie Darko began at the tail end of 1997 when a 22-year-old Richard Kelly had just finished his studies at the USC School of Cinematic Arts in Los Angeles. Rather than jumping straight into a directing career, Kelly took a day job as an assistant at a post-production facility, and it was during this period of relative uncertainty that he began seriously weighing what his first feature screenplay should be. He wanted the project to matter, he was wary of putting his name on something mediocre, and the prospect of writing a debut script that failed to make an impression clearly weighed on him. That hesitation meant the idea sat with him for almost a year before he committed anything to paper. It wasn't until October 1998 that Kelly felt ready to actually sit down and write. When he did, he moved quickly and with intensity, completing the screenplay in 28 days, a detail that mirrors the 28-day countdown that structures the plot of the finished film. The time of year in which he wrote it also shaped the material directly. Because he was writing in the run up to Halloween, the holiday became baked into the story itself, giving the film its autumnal costume party backdrop and its late October climax. Kelly has described his ambitions for the script in fairly expansive terms. He wanted to write something that felt ambitious and personal, but also nostalgic, a story that reached back to his own adolescence in the 1980s while doing something unusual with genre, merging science fiction with the more familiar rhythms of a coming of age drama. Critics later picked up on exactly this hybridity when the New York Times reviewed the finished film. It drew a direct line to the teen movies of John Hughes, noting how the adult characters are largely useless or ineffectual and how Donnie's suffering functions narratively to make him seem more emotionally attuned than those around him. Kelly himself later summed up the tone he was chasing as an affectionate but pointed reminiscence of suburban American life under Ronald Reagan. The film's central image, a jet engine crashing without explanation into a suburban home, had its roots in something Kelly had read as a child. He recalled a news story, which he later concluded was probably an urban legend, about a chunk of ice falling from an airplane wing and smashing through a boy's bedroom. The boy in the story wasn't home at the time and so wasn't killed. Kelly took that premise, an object falling from the sky with no clear origin, and made it the engine literally of his script. He built the rest of the story outward from that mystery, intending from a fairly early stage that the plane the debris came from would belong to a different dimension, one that Donnie's mother happened to be flying on. He wanted the journey toward explaining the mystery to be as compelling as the answer itself. Interestingly, Kelly considered for a time sticking closer to the source material and replacing the jet engine with a falling chunk of ice, though he ultimately kept the engine. The film's deeper mechanics, the language of time travel, alternate universes, and wormholes that eventually surfaces in the story were drawn from Kelly's reading of Stephen Hawking's A Brief History of Time, which gave him a scientific vocabulary to hang the more mystical elements of the plot on. Kelly was firm about setting the film in 1988, a decision he stuck with even though he later admitted to feeling pressure from others to modernize the setting. He tried to figure out a way to make the story work as a contemporary tale but couldn't make it click, so the late 1980s setting remained. Interestingly, the film didn't always open with Donnie waking up on a golf course. In the earliest draft, he woke up in a shopping mall instead, a detail that was eventually changed. The psychological dimension of the story, Donnie's visions of Frank being read by the adults around him as symptoms of mental illness, came out of research Kelly did on his own, digging into paranoid schizophrenia online. He was drawn to the diagnosis specifically because it is such a broad and difficult to pin down condition, which he felt gave him room to root a supernatural, almost mystical story in something that at least gestured towards science and medicine. The first draft of the screenplay ran to somewhere between 145 and 150 pages, considerably longer than a typical feature script. Kelly made a deliberate choice not to go back and revise as he wrote, worried that stopping to second guess himself partway through would derail the whole effort. Once it was finished, he showed it to producer Sean McKittrick, who has said he had never come across anything quite like it before. McKittrick worked with Kelly to sharpen the script and make sure its more unconventional elements remained comprehensible to an audience. Two further drafts followed, eventually producing a tighter 128-page script. Kelly has said that if he had tried to spell out the ending in clearer terms, the whole film would have buckled under the weight of its own self-seriousness, and he credited McKittrick, co-producer Nancy Juvonen, and star Jake Gyllenhaal with pushing back loudly and insistently against attempts to reduce the story to one tidy explanation. There is a strong autobiographical undercurrent running through the script. Kelly has acknowledged that there is a lot of himself in Donnie. He grew up in the suburban town of Midlothian, Virginia, and has said that a real local woman there was known, much like the character Roberta Sparrow in the film, by a nickname evoking death, and was known for the habit of standing by the road repeatedly opening and closing her mailbox. Kelly also folded in a memory of nearly hitting a homeless person while driving, run-ins with teachers over what should or shouldn't be taught in class, and his own experience of sleepwalking as a younger person, all of which found their way into Donnie's story in one form or another. Even a small, crude piece of dialogue used during the Darko family's dinner table scene came from real life. It was an insult two of Kelly's film school friends used to throw back and forth at each other. Frank's design as a rabbit was present from the earliest stages of the script, Though Kelly has said he isn't entirely sure whether the idea came to him in a dream or grew out of his long standing fascination with Richard Adams's novel Watership Down. That novel was originally meant to have a larger presence in the story. Assigned reading in a class taught by Drew Barrymore's character after the school administration had banned Graham Greene from the curriculum. But this thread was cut from the theatrical release, surviving only in the director's cut because the script's structure and tone were unusual enough to be a hard sell without visual reference. Kelly made sure producers read the full screenplay before he discussed the project with them in person. Complicating matters further, Kelly and McKittrick refused to consider any version of the deal that didn't have Kelly directing, a stance that scared off a number of potential backers. Kelly has described 1999 as a grinding year of meeting after meeting that always ended the same way, to the point that he considered the project effectively dead. McKittrick later summed up the situation by saying the script had become the kind of project everyone around town wanted to make but was too nervous to actually commit to. The turning point came when CIA agents John Campisi and Rob Paris took an interest in the material and signed Kelly. Kelly has said he was stunned by the offer and it meaningfully improved the odds of the film getting made since it now carried the implicit endorsement of a major agency. Representation opened doors to meetings with high-profile figures including Francis Ford Coppola, Ben Stiller, William Horberg, and Betty Thomas. The Coppola meeting stood out in particular. Coppola zeroed in on a single line delivered by Barrymore's character after she's fired from her teaching job about how kids these days have to work everything out for themselves because the adults around them are clueless, and told Kelly in dramatic fashion that this line was effectively what his entire film was about. Casting Donnie proved to be a winding process. Vince Vaughn was offered the role early on but turned it down, feeling he was too old to convincingly play a teenager. Mark Wahlberg was also approached, but reportedly wanted to play the role with a lisp, which didn't fit what Kelly was going for. Early in 2000, actor Jason Schwartzman expressed interest and signed on to play Donnie, a development Kelly later said legitimized him in the eyes of the industry and brought renewed interest to the project. Around the same time, Pandora Cinema stepped in with an offer of a $2.5 million production budget. Schwartzman's agent passed the script along to Nancy Juvonen, co-owner of Flower Films alongside Drew Barrymore. Juvonen and Barrymore liked what they read and wanted in, leading to a meeting between Kelly, McKittrick, and the pair in March 2000 held on the set of Charlie's Angels 2000, which Barrymore was shooting at the time. Barrymore agreed to take the role of Karen Pomeroy, and Flower Films' involvement allowed the budget to grow to $4. 5 million, a figure Kelly later called the absolute bare minimum needed to make the film as envisioned. With financing finally secured, pre-production moved quickly and filming was locked in for the summer of 2000, scheduled in part around Barrymore's limited one-week availability. But by July, Schwartzman had dropped out due to scheduling conflicts, sending Kelly into what he later described as an exciting scramble to find a replacement, during which he met with a number of promising young actors, including Patrick Fugit and Lucas Black. Jake Gyllenhaal, who happened to be in Los Angeles auditioning for other roles, read the script and was captivated enough by his own account that he had to pull over on the side of the road to keep reading. With filming due to start within a month, Kelly worked closely with Gyllenhaal to refine his dialogue, giving the young actor considerable freedom to shape the character, including his own idea to make his voice sound almost childlike when speaking to Frank, framing the imaginary figure as a source of comfort rather than pure menace. Gyllenhaal also suggested that his real-life sister, Maggie Gyllenhaal, be cast as Donnie's on-screen sister Elizabeth. Jolene Purdy's audition for the role of Cherita marked the very first audition of her acting career. Kelly has also credited Juvonen specifically with playing a key role in bringing both Noah Weil and Patrick Swayze onto the project. Designing Frank the Rabbit took real trial and error. Kelly recalled several collaborators pitching him concepts that came out looking closer to a cute Easter bunny than the unsettling figure he had in mind. He wanted Frank to feel disturbing and animalistic, not cuddly. He sketched his own rough ideas for Frank's face and handed them to production designer Alex Hammond, who then worked those into proper front and side view drawings of the mask, along with concept sketches for the full body suit. Kelly has again pointed to Watership Down as an inspiration behind Frank's conception. The finished design then went to costume designer April Ferry, who built the suit from scratch and brought in a sculptor to create the character's unsettling, distorted grin. Kelly was insistent that the face needed to genuinely unnerve people who saw it. The costume was first shown to the full cast and crew at Loyola High School shortly after production began, although actor James Duval wore the suit for virtually every scene requiring it. A stand in wore it for the very first shoot involving the costume. Kelly remembered the room going quiet the moment people saw it, which he took as confirmation that the design was working as intended, and which brought him a measure of relief after all the earlier false starts. Kelly also had specific ideas about how Frank should sound, wanting the voice to come across as though it were being spoken through liquid, carrying something like the power of the ocean. Achieving that effect took a considerable amount of time working directly with the sound designer on Duval's vocal recordings. Budget limitations shaped even the smaller design decisions. There wasn't enough money for costume designer Ferry to dress the entire supporting cast in period accurate 1980s clothing, so she suggested outfitting the students in school uniforms instead. Kelly liked this solution beyond its practicality, feeling it reinforced the film's underlying theme of Donnie pushing back against conformity and the rigid structures of the education system. Kelly selected Stephen Poster as his cinematographer after working through a stack of resumes. What caught his eye was Poster's earlier work shooting Someone to Watch Over Me 1987 for director Ridley Scott, which Kelly took as a kind of proof of legitimacy in the industry. Poster hadn't shot a feature in 2 years at that point, and Kelly had to talk him into taking the job for reduced pay. Before agreeing to anything else, Poster insisted that the two of them go through the entire script together, line by line, scene by scene, with Kelly explaining exactly what each moment was meant to communicate to the audience. The process led to disagreements between them, but by the time it was finished, both had a shared precise understanding of what the film needed visually. Poster's standing in the industry and his relationship with Panavision also gave Kelly access to an unusually generous amount of camera and lighting equipment at a reduced rate. To set the tone for the film's nighttime photography, Kelly screened scenes from Peggy Sue Got Married 1986 for the crew, pointing to its idealized, softly nostalgic look as a reference point. The resulting cinematography in Donnie Darko has been described as lending the film a heightened, almost hyper real quality, one that subtly signals to the audience that things in the story are not quite what they appear to be. At the time of its Sundance premiere, Donnie Darko was publicized as one of the first films to make notable use of digital visual effects. Kelly was careful about how these effects were deployed, wanting to use them sparingly and only where they served the story directly. The shimmering, liquid like barrier that appears between Donnie and Frank in the bathroom scene being one example. The strange, spear like liquid tendrils that emerge from characters' torsos elsewhere in the film echo the water tentacle effect from The Abyss 1989 and have been read by some as visual representations of a character's inner psychological state, or alternatively as a symbol of predestination, the sense that Donnie is being steered by some outside force, possibly divine. Kelly has said the visual idea actually originated from something more mundane: the on-screen telestrator lines that football commentator John Madden used to diagram player movement during instant replays. Fittingly, the first appearance of this effect in the film comes while Donnie is watching a football game on television. Similarly, the sequence in which Donnie's high school floods was inspired by a surreal photo montage by artist Scott Mutter, depicting a giant escalator descending into a churning sea of filming principal photography wrapped in 28 days, matching the 28-day time frame that structures the plot, shooting through July and August of 2000. The bulk of the production took place in Long Beach, California. Kelly had no interest in filming elsewhere since he wanted the finished film to carry a distinctly suburban feel throughout. Production also benefited, in a roundabout way, from an ongoing strike by commercial actors at the time, which had left a pool of actors and crew members available and willing to work for reduced union scale, helping staff out the production. Specific locations were chosen carefully. The golf course scenes were shot at Virginia Country Club, while the school sequences were filmed at Loyola High School in Los Angeles. The film's opening scene, showing Donnie waking up and beginning his sleepwalking journey home, was the very first sequence shot captured at sunrise on the Angeles Crest Highway. The marquee of the movie theater scene in the film was shot at the Aero Theater in Santa Monica. The pace and pressure of the shoot took a physical toll on Kelly, who has said he lost roughly 20 pounds over the course of production, driven by the demands of a tight schedule combined with the pressure of proving to a cast and crew that he was capable of directing his first feature. By his own account, he was upfront with the actors from the start about his inexperience, admitting he wasn't entirely sure how to direct in a conventional authoritative sense, and so he defaulted to talking to them more like friends than employees. The jet engine that crashes into Donnie's bedroom was a physical prop purchased by production designer Alex Hammond for $10,000. The moment it falls through the roof was captured in a single shot, achieved by rigging the shell of the engine above the set and firing it down through the ceiling using an air pressure gun. Cinematographer Poster has recalled that people involved in the production frequently told Kelly that jet engines simply don't fall off planes in real life, a claim that was undercut somewhat by an actual incident during filming, when a chunk of engine debris, described as roughly the size of a dishwasher, fell from a Boeing 747 and landed on a beach. On a lighter note, Patrick Swayze had his hair frosted specifically for his role as motivational speaker Jim Cunningham, and the fictional infomercial footage seen in the film was shot on Swayze's own ranch. Kelly has said his goal from the very opening shot was to draw the audience fully into the world of the film. He was meticulous about period detail, working closely with the transportation coordinator to make sure every car that appeared on screen was appropriate to the late 1980s setting. And he was careful to avoid pushing the visual style or costuming into exaggerated kitsch, wanting instead to preserve a more restrained, conservative feel appropriate to a Virginia-style suburb. One of the film's more memorable sequences, an extended tracking shot through the high school set to Tears for Fears head over heels, initially unsettled the production and line managers, who worried it played like an indulgent, dialogue-free music video that didn't move the story forward. Once they saw the finished cut of the sequence, however, their opinion shifted. Notably, Kelly choreographed the entire sequence to the song before the rights to actually use the track in the film had been secured. Elsewhere, the sequence showing the dance troupe Sparkle Motion performing was among the more technically demanding setups for cinematographer Poster, who used stage smoke to create the appearance of visible light beams and to render the dancers as silhouettes against the stage. Technically, the film was shot using a Panavision Panastar camera in anamorphic format, meaning it was filmed in widescreen but recorded onto standard 35mm stock. This choice came with real drawbacks, including the need for roughly twice the normal amount of lighting, but Kelly remained committed to it. Poster pushed for the use of Kodak 800 ASA film stock, a choice some colleagues warned would look grainy and unrefined, but he persuaded producers that shooting anamorphic would actually reduce production headaches, since the format would crop out the low ceilings common to many of the film's shooting locations, which otherwise would have been visible in frame. The anamorphic setup created its own odd demands on set. Swayze reportedly had to kneel for certain shots so that he would properly fit within the frame. Early in the process, Kelly had promised editor Sam Bauer that Bauer would cut his first feature whenever the opportunity arose, a plan that Pandora Cinema initially resisted. Kelly and McKittrick had to push hard to get Bauer approved for the job, and Pandora eventually relented. The film's water barrier visual effect seen in Donnie's bathroom was created by Kelly Carlton for a modest $5,000. Post-production, the film's score was composed by San Diego-based musician and songwriter Michael Andrews. Kelly knew from the outset that the film's tight budget put a composer of the stature of Thomas Newman or Danny Elfman out of reach, So he instead looked for someone younger, hungrier, and talented, but not yet established. Andrews came to the project on a recommendation from Jim Juvonen, brother of producer Nancy Juvonen. Once a distribution deal was finally in place, the production team spent the summer of 2001 revisiting the finished film. Producer Aaron Ryder, who helped secure the eventual distribution deal, has said the goal of this period was simply to get the film into the best shape possible, though he acknowledged the process wasn't easy. Additional material was shot during this period specifically to iron out plot holes. For instance, Ryder suggested inserting shots of Frank into the sequence set to Mad World, which hadn't originally included them. Separately, filmmakers Christopher Nolan and his wife and producing partner Emma Thomas advised Kelly to add title cards throughout the film, marking the passage of time toward October 30, 1988, a structural device that Kelly ultimately incorporated into the finished cut. Music. The soundtrack of Donnie Darko leans heavily on early 1980s post-punk and new wave tracks, each used to reinforce the film's period setting and emotional tone. The film opens to The Killing Moon by Echo and the Bunnymen. Its celebrated unbroken tracking shot introducing Donnie's high school is set to Head Over Heels by Tears for Fears. The dance troupe Sparkle Motion, led by Donnie's younger sister Samantha, performs on stage to Duran Duran's Notorious. That scene was not originally shot to that song. During filming, the dancers actually performed to the Pet Shop Boys' West End Girls. But the rights to that track could not be secured in time for the finished release, forcing a substitution. Later in the film, Under the Milky Way by the Church plays as Donnie and Gretchen step out of his bedroom during the Halloween party sequence. Joy Division's Love Will Tear Us Apart also appears diegetically during the same party. Heard as Donnie and Gretchen spend time upstairs together, an anachronistic touch since the specific recording used wasn't released until 1995, even though the film is set in 1988. In the director's cut released a few years later, several of these musical cues were altered. The opening sequence swaps The Killing Moon for INX's Never Tear Us Apart. Under the Milky Way is relocated to a later scene of Donnie and his father driving home after a session with his therapist, and The Killing Moon reappears elsewhere. Now scoring the moment Gretchen and Donnie return to the party after leaving Donnie's parents' bedroom, the film's closing sequence is scored by a stripped-down, piano-driven cover version of Tears for Fears' Mad World, performed by American musician Gary Jules, a longtime friend of composer Michael Andrews from their school days. This rendition took on a life well beyond the film itself. In 2003, it was released as a standalone single in the United Kingdom, where it spent 3 weeks at number one on the UK singles chart and became the country's Christmas number one single that year, an unusually durable piece of cultural afterlife for a cover track that began life as incidental music for a low-budget, initially little-seen American film. Rarole's theatrical Donnie Darko had its world premiere at the Sundance Film Festival in Park City, Utah on January 19, 2001. Securing a theatrical distributor afterward proved to be a drawn-out process. Kelly has said it took roughly 6 months, during which the film came close at one point to being picked up by the premium cable and satellite network Stars rather than getting a cinema release at all. One recurring sticking point in these negotiations was a scene involving Donnie firing a gun because the film was being shopped in the years immediately following the 1999 Columbine High School massacre. Some potential distributors were wary that the scene could be read as promoting or glamorizing violence among teenagers. The soundtrack created its own complications since the rights to several of the film's key songs had not yet been formally paid for at the point of sale, raising the risk that they would need to be pulled for a wider release. Kelly was also encouraged at various points to trim roughly 30 minutes from the runtime. Despite these obstacles, New Market Films eventually agreed to acquire the film and arrange a theatrical release through a service deal with IFC Films. Kelly brought Drew Barrymore directly into these negotiations, recalling that he had her personally appeal to Newmarket to close the deal, since the studio had initially been leaning toward releasing the film straight to video rather than in theaters. Kelly has credited Christopher Nolan and Emma Thomas with playing a pivotal behind-the-scenes role in finally securing distribution. After Aaron Ryder, producer of Memento, arranged a private screening of Donnie Darko for Newmarket executives Chris Ball and Will Tyrer and encouraged them to take the film on. The film opened theatrically on October 26, 2001, eventually expanding to a peak of 58 theaters across the United States. Its official premiere screening was held at the Egyptian Theatre in Hollywood. On its opening weekend, the film earned $110,494, placing it at number 34 on the national box office chart, a modest showing for a film that would go on to develop such a devoted following. The timing of the release proved to be a significant obstacle. The film opened only about 6 weeks after the September 11 attacks, and its trailer prominently featured a scene involving an aircraft accident, an image that felt considerably more fraught to audiences in the immediate aftermath of that tragedy than it would have otherwise. Kelly later reflected that the film simply wasn't the kind of experience audiences were looking for during such a raw, emotionally difficult period in American life. Newmarket's president, Bob Burney, similarly pointed to the film's bleak mood combined with its unfortunate timing as the central reason for its weak theatrical performance, suggesting that critics themselves struggled to fully engage with or accept the film on its own terms during that stretch, with the overall national mood coloring the reception of nearly everything released around it. By the time its original theatrical run concluded on April 11, 2002, Donnie Darko had grossed a total of $517,375 domestically, a small fraction of its $4.5 million budget. It was only through subsequent reissues, driven by growing word of mouth interest, that the film eventually climbed to a worldwide gross of roughly $7.6 million, enough to recoup its original production budget. In spite of its rocky theatrical debut, the film steadily built a devoted, almost evangelical fan base and developed into a certified cult favorite. This momentum was helped along significantly by the film's home video release in March 2002, after which New York City's Pioneer Theatre began hosting regular midnight screenings of the film, a run that continued for a remarkable 28 consecutive months, a length of time that fittingly again echoes the film's own internal 28-day structure. The film's UK release in October 2002 marked another turning point, sparking a fresh wave of critical and commercial attention. It sold around 300,000 tickets within the first 6 weeks of release in Britain, a result driven largely by word of mouth marketing rather than conventional advertising, and went on to gross the equivalent of about $2.5 million during its UK theatrical run. To mark the film's growing cultural footprint in Britain, its UK distributor Metrodome Distribution organized an art exhibition titled They Made Me Do It, staged over a 28-day run at the Dreambags Jaguar Shoes Cafe Bar in Shoreditch, London. The project invited a number of graffiti artists to create film-inspired artwork, giving each of them a strikingly specific time limit of 6 hours, 42 minutes, and 12 seconds to complete their piece. Another nod to the film's obsession with exact durations of time. In October 2003, Kelly published the Donnie Darko book, a companion volume featuring a foreword written by Jake Gyllenhaal reflecting on the film's famously confusing narrative. The book also includes an extended interview with Kelly covering the making and marketing of the film, as well as questions about his personal life, along with the complete shooting script, several pages excerpted from the fictional in-universe text, The Philosophy of Time Travel, and a range of production photographs and concept art, including early sketches of Frank's mask and slides used in the film's fictional Jim Cunningham motivational presentation. Alongside the film's theatrical and print presence, an official website, DonnieDarko.com, functioned as an elaborate interactive marketing tool filled with puzzles, hidden content, and previously unseen material expanding on the film's fictional universe, including information about what happened to various characters after the events of the story concluded. Scholar James Beck has written about the site standing as a piece of storytelling in its own right, arguing that its habit of introducing new narrative material while remaining deliberately indifferent to the film's actual chronology reinforced one of the movie's central themes: the fluidity and instability of time itself. Beck has further argued that the site distinguished itself from typical promotional websites of the era by treating its visitor not as an outside observer looking in, but as someone situated within the fictional universe of the film, turning what could have been a simple advertisement into something closer to an immersive experience. Home Media 20th Century Fox Home Entertainment handled the film's home video releases across multiple formats over the years. The first came in March 2002 when the film arrived on both VHS and DVD. The DVD edition included a range of bonus material, among them audio commentaries, theatrical trailers, and television spots, concept art galleries, and an interactive guide walking viewers through the in universe text, The Philosophy of Time Travel. Newmarket president Bob Burney later described the film's performance on DVD as a runaway hit, noting that US sales alone brought in more than $10 million, a striking reversal for a film that had earned barely $500,000 during its theatrical run. The film made its way to Blu ray in 2009 in an edition that included both the original theatrical cut and the later director's cut. A UK release of this same Blu ray edition followed in 2010. A 4-disc set arrived in 2011, timed to mark the film's 10th anniversary. In December 2016, UK-based distributor Arrow Films released a new limited edition Blu-ray and DVD set drawn from a fresh 4K scan of the original film print and personally supervised and approved by Kelly. This edition reached the United States the following year in 2017. In April 2021, Arrow Films went a step further, releasing a 2-disc Ultra HD Blu-ray box set containing both the theatrical and director's cuts, each restored in 4K resolution directly from the original camera negatives, with the restoration supervised jointly by Kelly and cinematographer Steven Poster. The set was rounded out with a selection of physical extras, including a poster, a set of postcards, and an accompanying 100-page book. The push for a director's cut of the film had actually taken shape years earlier, in late 2003, when Kelly and Bob Burney attended a screening marking the first anniversary of the film's ongoing midnight movie run at New York's Pioneer Theatre, Donnie Darko. The director's cut went on to premiere on May 29, 2004 at the Seattle International Film Festival, followed shortly afterward by additional screenings in New York City and Los Angeles on July 23. Demand for the Seattle premiere was strong enough that tickets sold out within a single day, and the cut grossed nearly $33,000 over a 5-day theatrical run there. Compared to the original theatrical version, the director's cut runs roughly 20 minutes longer and features a somewhat altered soundtrack reflecting the musical substitutions noted earlier. The director's cut DVD itself arrived on February 15, 2005, offered in both single disc and double disc configurations. The double disc edition was available either in a standard case or as part of a limited edition that came housed in a lenticular slipcase, its cover artwork shifting between images of Donnie and Frank depending on the angle it was viewed from. Most of the set's bonus material was reserved for the 2-disc edition, including storyboard excerpts, a 52-minute production diary, a short number one fan video, a cult following featurette interviewing British fans of the film, and a new trailer cut specifically for the director's cut. The single disc edition later found its way into an unusual promotional tie-in, distributed as a free giveaway alongside copies of the British newspaper The Sunday Times on February 19, 2006. The director's cut DVD also included the full text of The Philosophy of Time Travel, the fictional book written by the character Roberta Sparrow that Donnie is given and reads over the course of the story. This text expands considerably on the scientific and philosophical ideas underpinning the film's plot and has often been treated by fans and critics alike as a more reliable key to understanding the story's mechanics than anything offered by the theatrical cut alone. According to an analysis published by Salon, drawing directly on the book's content, much of the film is understood to take place within an unstable tangent universe, a parallel reality physically connected to the primary universe through a wormhole, the entrance to which is visually represented by the vortex seen at the film's climax. This tangent universe is described as an almost exact duplicate of the primary one, differing only in the presence of an artifact, an object that does not belong there, in this case the jet engine. If that artifact is not returned to the primary universe by a living receiver, Donnie in this case, within the 28-day window, the primary universe is destined to be destroyed, when the unstable tangent universe eventually collapses into a black hole. To help accomplish this task, the living receiver is granted a set of extraordinary abilities, including a degree of foresight, enhanced physical strength, and control over certain elemental forces, though this comes at the cost of the disturbing visions and mounting paranoia that define Donnie's experience throughout the film. Meanwhile, the manipulated living, essentially everyone around the receiver, are nudged by unseen forces into behaving in ways that, however strange individually, collectively steer the receiver toward returning the artifact. The manipulated dead, meaning characters like Frank and Gretchen who die within the tangent universe, are described as possessing a greater awareness than the living, including the ability to move through time and are capable of setting what the text calls an insurance trap, a scenario deliberately engineered to leave the receiver with no option but to act and save the primary universe. Reception box office Donnie Darko's commercial performance tells the story of two very different phases: a nearly disastrous theatrical run followed by a long, slow building afterlife that transformed it into one of the more celebrated cult films of its era. As detailed above, its opening weekend gross of $110 494 across a modest number of theaters translated into a ranking of just 34th at the national box office, and by the time its initial theatrical run wound down in April 2002, the film had taken in only $517,375 domestically against its $4. 5 million budget, a result that on paper would typically mark a film as a straightforward commercial failure. The reasons behind this poor initial showing were fairly specific and in some respects a matter of unfortunate timing rather than any failure of the film itself. Its release date fell only about 6 weeks after the September 11th attacks, and marketing materials for the film prominently featured a plane related accident, imagery that understandably registered very differently with audiences in late 2001 than it might have at almost any other moment. Richard Kelly has spoken candidly about how poorly suited the film was to the emotional climate of the country at that specific time, while Newmarket president Bob Burney pointed more broadly to the film's bleak tone, compounding the effects of that timing, suggesting that even critics were somewhat thrown off by the film in that particular moment, with the prevailing national mood affecting how nearly everything was being received and discussed. What makes Donnie Darko's commercial story unusual is how thoroughly it recovered from this rocky start, not through a re-release strategy in the traditional sense, but through a slow accumulation of grassroots interest. Following its home video release in March 2002, the film found an appreciative audience through unconventional channels, most notably the 28 consecutive month run of midnight screenings at New York's Pioneer Theatre, a length of engagement that is itself a testament to the durability of the film's fan base. Later reissues on the strength of this growing cult reputation eventually pushed the film's worldwide theatrical gross to approximately $7. 6 million, enough to recoup its original budget, even if only barely and only after a considerable delay. The film's UK release the following year in October 2002 added meaningfully to this recovery, with around 300,000 tickets sold in the first 6 weeks on the strength of word of mouth marketing and an eventual UK theatrical gross equivalent to roughly $2.5 million. Perhaps the most telling measure of the film's eventual commercial success, however, came not from theaters at all but from home video. Once released on DVD, the film became what Newmarket's Bob Burney later called a runaway hit, generating more than $10 million in US home video sales alone, a figure that dwarfs its theatrical earnings by a wide margin and underscores just how much of the film's commercial life took place away from cinema screens entirely, through word of mouth recommendation, repeat viewings, and the kind of dedicated fan culture that grew up around it in the years following its underwhelming theatrical debut. Critical opinion on Donnie Darko was generally favorable from the outset, though it was far from unanimous, and the film has attracted its share of pointed detractors alongside its many admirers. On the review aggregation site Rotten Tomatoes, the film holds an 88% positive rating based on 124 collected reviews with an average score of 7.6 out of 10. The site's consensus summary describes Richard Kelly's debut as a bold and original piece of filmmaking full of provocative ideas and intelligence, anchored by a standout performance from Jake Gyllenhaal in the central role. On Metacritic, the theatrical cut of the film holds a weighted average score of 71 out of 100 based on 21 reviews, a figure the site classifies as indicating generally favorable reviews. Critics writing around the time of the film's Sundance premiere and subsequent theatrical release were frequently struck by its genre blending ambition. Andrew Johnston, writing for Us Weekly, singled the film out as one of the standout entries at Sundance in 2001, characterizing it as an intense mixture of science fiction, spiritual inquiry, and teenage angst. Gene Oppenheimer, reviewing for New Times, LA, was similarly impressed, comparing the film's mounting sense of dread to Gathering Storm Clouds and ranking it among the most exceptional films of that year. Writing for ABC Australia, critic Megan Spencer described the film as menacing and dreamlike while also finding it exciting, suggesting it had the capacity to stir something deeply emotional in viewers that they might not have realized was there. Roger Ebert offered a more tempered response initially, awarding the original theatrical cut 2.5 stars out of 4. Notably, when he later revisited the film upon the release of the director's cut, he raised his rating to 3 stars, suggesting his estimation of the film grew somewhat over time and with the benefit of the expanded version. Not every critic was won over, however, and the film's admirers have never been shy about acknowledging its detractors. Critic Sam Adams was notably unimpressed, describing the film as something of a disorganized mess, pointing to what he saw as an incoherent plot, sloppy writing, and an inconsistent tone throughout. Adams also pushed back specifically against the film's heavy reliance on its 1980s suburban American setting, arguing that the constant references to the era felt somewhat beside the point and, in his view, reflected the film's broader struggle to settle on a clear identity. A review published in the San Antonio Current took a more mixed position, praising the film's slow accumulation of mystery and its compelling ensemble of characters while ultimately finding fault with its conclusion, which the reviewer felt was underwhelming, describing the ending as cheap and lacking the payoff the build-up seemed to promise. Even amid this mixed critical reception, one element of the film has drawn consistent praise across the years: its treatment of 1980s nostalgia. Multiple retrospective pieces published well after the film's original release have singled out its evocation of the decade as a particular strength, crediting the film with capturing a specific texture of suburban American adolescence that later films and television series, including in some comparisons Stranger Things, would go on to mine in similar ways. The film's critical and cultural standing has only grown in the years since its rocky theatrical debut. It has appeared repeatedly on prominent best of lists. Empire magazine placed it second on its list of the 50 greatest independent films of all time and 53rd on its broader list of the 500 greatest movies of all time, published in 2008. Entertainment Weekly ranked it 14th on its list of the 50 best high school movies. Film 4 placed it 9th on its list of 50 films. To See Before You Die, published in 2006. An Australian Broadcasting Corporation poll in 2005 placed the film among the top 5 in its My Favorite Film survey. Most recently, in 2025, the film placed 113th in a reader-voted edition of the New York Times list of the 100 best movies of the 21st century, a sign that the film's reputation has continued to hold steady with audiences well over 2 decades after its original commercially disappointing release. The film also picked up a number of formal honors and nominations in the years immediately following its release. In 2001, Richard Kelly's screenplay won Best Screenplay at the San Diego Film Critics Society Awards, and the film won the Audience Award for Best Feature at the Sweden Fantastic Film Festival. It received a Best Film nomination at the Sitges Film Festival and a nomination for the Grand Jury Prize at Sundance, along with 3 nominations at the Independent Spirit Awards for Best First Feature, Best First Screenplay, and Best Male Lead for Jake Gyllenhaal. The following year, in 2002, the film won a special award at the Academy of Science Fiction, Fantasy and Horror Films 28th Saturn Awards, along with the Silver Scream Award at the Amsterdam Fantastic Film Festival, and received a Best Breakthrough Filmmaker nomination from the Online Film Critics Society. The film's reception has also extended beyond conventional film criticism into more academic corners, with scholars examining both the movie itself and its unusually elaborate promotional website as interconnected pieces of a single narrative experience. A reflection of just how much interpretive attention Donnie Darko has continued to generate among both casual fans and more formal critical audiences in the years since its release.